this goes, those issues will arise because that has been the experience in other situations. So we're trying to head off all of those. So even this business, this is a massive effort, multidimensional. You mentioned security, you mentioned psychosocial issues. If you think even right now, let's just take food. You have approximately 7,000 people in shelters. That's 21,000 meals per day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Then you have 7,000 people registered, approximately two, in the homes. And then in addition to those, and I don't know the final number, but for families, I will think the boxes for families maybe as many as 5,000 would have gone out, because if you have, assuming 3 persons to every household of the 7,000 who move, you're talking close to 2,500. So the packages are done for about 2 weeks now.
Prime Minister,
And we do inside of social development, NEMO headquarters down at the central storage at Camden Park warehouse does. Then we have, I'm talking about food to be cooked. Then you have Red Cross is doing. Individual charities here and there, put in a little bit here. And then World Central Kitchen. They're doing now about 5,000 meals per day. A charity which we asked to come in. And they're doing that in people in homes. They're doing some particular meals for shelters too. And they have gone even in the orange zone to give in certain families, because some orange zone people, persons in the orange zone didn't leave. They figure that they represent such a danger to them, it's better they stay inside. Some left. That's the nature of the operation which you're having, 7,000 in the shelters, 7,000 in private homes. Then in the orange zone, both sides, people have been receiving. It's a massive operation. Massive.
We'll see a start and a build up of these LPs, okay? If that happens, there could be some confidence it would take 2 days, but I would not bet money on it. I would not bet lives on it, It could be shorter. But that's the sort of pattern we might see. But we might see other earthquakes. There's a thing called the VT, volcano tectonic, and we might have to change the working model in our head.
How long? How long for that? Let's say that kind of activity.
Yeah.
How long that would go on before you say it's going to sleep?
This activity here, it's not just this activity. You've got to use different measurements.
I see.
So if this is the said nothing, ask me that question.
Okay.
I think it's bad to anticipate it because other things might sort of take over.
I know they say that volcanoes erupt in a particular style. Like I think they're saying there's a Vincentian style.
We may well have invented a Vincentian style. There's certain things about this eruption that have, I wouldn't say surprised, but we weren't expecting. The main one is the amount of ash. A huge amount of ash over the island, which we didn't have in previous eruptions.
Yeah.
And I doubt it will be called a Vincentian eruption, but it seems to be particularly.
Each volcano has its own
He's the
unique way
expert
of
on this.
operating, really. And each time the volcano erupts, there's usually some unique circumstances. This one, we think the unique circumstances here was the fact that you had a pre-existing dome, and then you had a new dome. And we're thinking, only thinking is that somehow affected the initial explosivity of what happened. So the fact that you had a dome that was still there for 42 years, and then you had another one, somehow affected the dynamics of the system. So that's not unusual because each time, so the way in which super erupted this time is slightly different than in 79. In 79, they had a dome, but they had water, and the scientists then thought that why it erupted as it did is because of the interaction of new material that interaction with the water was there. And in fact, the working theory hypothesis then for super is that you have to have a lake to have it going into what they call a ferromagnetic state and then a magmatic. But we didn't really have a lake. We had these two domes. So it's each time it erupts, it teaches us new things. And I think what's going to be significant with this one is the extent to which we collected data. We collected a lot more data than we did last time. So I suspect, I think the Prime Minister would like to hear it, but I suspect that we will have scientists coming here many, many years studying this volcano. And I suspect you're going to have papers and you're going to have conferences, bringing people here, which is good, listen. We're already thinking about a conference next year, incidents.
Very good.
It was very good for us.
Yeah.
The activity started in December, and that's when we started putting in equipment.
Yeah.
So by the time it exploded, we actually had good equipment. Whereas sometimes at volcanoes, you're coming after the explosion.
Yeah.
And there's this hole in the knowledge. But here we've got a really good set of data from the entire eruption.
Professor, I wanted to ask, because I've been monitoring your site, exactly what does the continuous building and destruction of lava domes mean for the island?
What it means for the island? Maybe it means
Well, mean in total, yeah.
Well, that's our working sort of areas.
Professor, may I come
What do you want to say?
Do you want to come here?
Yeah.
Or do you want to do it outside?
I prefer this gentleman to get his spotlight on.
I'll do it now.
enough spotlight on, right?
Maybe outside, because
The
the doors are open, things are coming,
Yeah.
And the backlight is back.
Yeah, the backlight. All right, so we
Sir, I have a direct view here.
headed outside.
I work for you.
So you asked the question, right? Right. So what is happening with things generally is that the volcano is essentially, there's a lot of gas that we're not quite sure how much gas. And the gas is what drives the eruption. What drives it is how much gas it has in it and the ease with which fundamentally gas comes out, right? So what we think is that at the beginning, it had a lot of gas in it and it got rid of a substantial amount of it, right? And the gas that's available now for it to keep on running is probably a little less. And also, the conditions at the summit is different. It's basically have an open crater up there now. So the gas is able to come out easily. So what we're looking for is something that would probably restrict that. And one thing that could restrict it is if it grows a dome, which essentially means that it has a mass of rock that will now stop the gas from coming out so easily. And what we think have been happening, and the pattern has slightly changed now, as you notice, it's a slightly different thing. But what we think will happen is that each time we had an explosion, it's because it basically got a little bit capped, and then it blasted the explosion, it blasted the dome that was there, or the cap that was on it. And then it started to sort of come out again and slowly form the cap, build up enough pressure, and had another explosion. So that's what it was doing, we think, for the last couple of days. It's slightly changed now. So to answer your question, it was kind of good in a sense that it meant that by doing that, it meant it didn't kind of build up enough pressure to have a huge explosion that went into those ash venting kind of phases, It meant that it could kind of, in a sense, it's a bit like a pressure cooker. It was, when a pressure cooker, easy steam, a little bit of steam was coming out. And that to a certain extent was good. But to say it was good in the context of simulation, it's better for the message this thing just go back to sleep, right? It's not good that keep on having this gas and having this explosion. That's bad. But in terms of the extent to which it could have big explosions, probably it was good in that context. I think we could manage better if we don't have these discrete sort of booms every now and then, rather than having this ash jetting that puts ash in Barbados and all over the place and just makes it. You can see the conditions here are much nicer than it was when it was ashing.
Yes.
We had ash like overnight. We went to sleep in ash and the ash came up. It was raining ash the whole day. That's not nice. So we would prefer the explosion to be, if there are explosions, to be more discreet. So in the context of your question, that's why I meant when, that's how it affects us in a sense. Yeah?
So these domes can be built pretty quickly, because I know sometimes the domes can take years to form.
Well, I think the thing that tricks people is that the dome that came out first was actually moving slower than super domes normally operate. And again, our working sort of theory of what happened is that rather than the dome being grown, what was happening is that the material that was there is being pushed out. So it wasn't really so much growing as it is that the gas-rich manganese below simply came up and pushed it out of the way. And once it had pushed it out of the way, because it was restricting it from coming out, it caused a lot more gas, a lot more pressure to build up, so that when it eventually got it out of the way, it just went crazy. And that's what we had in the first few days. So to the extent that that is what happened, if you're correct, it means that you cannot, to have that kind of explosivity, you kind of want to have, you will have to recreate those conditions. So as much as those conditions are not quite getting recreated, that's good. But also, we'd expect that as the gas runs out, one of the things that will probably happen is that you might get up it being that it comes out slow, and you actually have a dome that sits there for the next 100 years probably, rather than 42. You want to go sleep and not. It's interesting to see these things, but it's not interesting that the effects that it has on people is not so good. So.
Professor, I've heard it said that the volcanic ash that is produced now is probably more suited to, or better suited for construction than agriculture. Is there any truth to that, as far as you know?
As far as I know, no. In the sense that that's not my sort of line in terms of usage. I can speak to the ash in terms of its composition. And the composition of the ash that's coming out now is not that much different than the ash that's ever come out of sulfur. And the ash that always come out of sulfur is the same material we use fundamentally to construct. And it's also the same material that produces a lot of the fertility that we have. So in a sense, given what sulfur has produced in the past, I would say that it's good for both, because the material is not different. But I don't know enough about agriculture or construction to say that. The ash essentially is pulverized rock. It's just the same rock that you have all over cylinders. You just break it up into pieces, make it really, really fine. That's the ash. It's not the ash. When people hear ash, I think it's a misnomer to say it's ash in the context of, it's not ash like fire ash, like firewood ash. It's not the same. Firewood ash is organic. This is particles of rock that's broken up. So you have crystals, bits and pieces of rock, so it's very abrasive, very corrosive. But it has crystals and minerals in it that are quite good for agriculture. So when you mix it into the soil, often the fertility just cements land, and you know what it is, because it's volcanic material. And the fact that we use a lot of the construction material we use is actually volcanic. So in that sense, although we have a hard time when it's going, once it's done, it produces a lot of the materials that we use. The reason that we are here, the reason that we have the beautiful landscape we have, is because of volcanoes. So it's just that when they erupt, you cannot just have to run far from them.
Professor,
I'm sorry, I know you've warned of the lahars and so on that would tend to come for months, years, even after eruptions would have ceased.
Yeah.
What would it take for us, from your perspective, to know whether or not it's safe for persons to rebuild in some of these locations that have been affected by that?
I think I was making the point earlier on when Rod was making the point about lahars and warning systems, is that lahars affect river valleys. All kinds of hazards affect river valleys. You shouldn't build in river valleys. So you shouldn't build there. So it's not that you can't construct. You have lots of mountains and things, lots of places that are not river valleys you can build in. So
in the red zones
yes, there are lots of places that don't have river valleys. What happens is that when you build your town in river valleys, or when you build your structure in river valleys, expect, it's not the lahar alone, expect that when river comes down, when you have heavy rain, you're going to get affected, because you're building a vulnerable area. So you shouldn't. So if you're asking me whether you should build in a vulnerable area, this is a bad idea. If you ask me, you should build absolutely in the areas that you have to evacuate now. That really is a matter of whether or not you want to deal with the risk of the volcano erupting in the future. There will always be areas that will be, when the volcano is not erupting, that will be safe. Do all kinds of things in. But I guess when you're thinking long term, you need to think about, the chances. Is this volcano erupting? Okay, if you put on a structure, how long you want to survive for? And if you want to survive for 100 years, this is a bad idea, because volcano invariably going to erupt within the next 100 years, right? If you want to survive less than that, you say you see a balance. It seems 50 years. You think volcano erupt in the next 50 years, but you don't put structures that you expect to last 100 years. If you know, you understand. So that's the kind of dynamic, and that's a dynamic that the authorities, the planning people, government have to consider. What kind of assets you put in the area, given that this volcano clearly has shown us that it's not so quiet anymore. It used to be that, and given studies, it used to be that I've said it before, that I know for sure this will erupt once every 100 years. That's what the record going back to 4,000 or 5,000 years show. But certainly since 1902, it's increased the rate of eruption. So it's no longer 100 years, it's less than 100 years. I mean, you could calculate what it might be, give or take, but currently is less than 100 years. So when you develop in these areas, you have to consider that now. Gonsalves will forever have to, I hope they get it, I got it, that's why I'm in this business. I got it that this volcano could erupt. It sounds like everybody forget I think. And you know, you shouldn't be. If you're here, hopefully, if one thing that this volcano does in eruption is make sure St. Vincent understands that. Not only St. Vincent, but I don't know how you from, but anywhere near West Indies, including Trinidad, because you could have ash coming in your direction. Barbados, you can't take volcanoes for granted. We are fortunate in the region that we have volcanoes that don't erupt very often, but we are not fortunate that we don't have volcanoes. We have volcanoes, that's why the landscape is created largely by volcanism. The beautiful land that we have, but it comes with its dangers. So when we factor in development, we are factoring volcanoes.
So,
we haven't.
so this increased activity that we've seen, as you said, over the last 100 years, could it be down to increased earthquake activities? What is the science with regards to this?
We don't know. I mean, if you think of it, we've been looking at volcanism on volcanoes for a short space of time. Sucre is close to a little bit over 1 million years old. We have only been looking at, I'm speaking about the last, we have a lot of details here in the last 10,000 years, probably a little bit more than that. Really detailed information we only have within the last 4,000 years. And so, I'm telling you that it looks like within the last 100 years, it's changed slightly. I'm just looking at a very small, tiny thing. And so, I would not hold that as something to make any major conclusions on. All I would do is hold that to mean that at least from now on, we need to factor in volcanism and volcanoes. It's Vincent, in this scenario, and the rest of the region. So things like aviation, things like, you know, movement of people, all of that. You know, you don't have to start getting frightened. You just have to start planning for the possibility that if a volcano in Dominica goes off, what do the region do? Not Dominica alone. It's not a Dominican problem alone. This is not a Vincent problem alone. It's a regional problem. And I'm saying that we haven't taken it seriously, and we need to. So if it's one thing they should tell us, is that we should, you know. And I could say more about that, but then start telling you about the fact that we need to make sure that agencies like what I work for, that we have the resources to do what we do. You need to investigate what kind of resources we have, you journalists. Figure it out. See how this little agency that hardly having money do what it's doing.
Do you have all
It's
the
amazing.
resources you need here in St. Vincent for the
Well, of
work
course,
you're doing
yeah.
now?
Yes, of course. That's what tends to happen, you know. Governments and agencies, when something happens, I mean, and generally, there has been traditionally support for the agency, verbally, by all the governments. But often, there's a shortfall when things are not. I mean, all the governments and all the territories have tightness, you know, live in a resource-constrained region. And generally, once something is happening, you have the resources you need. So there is no problem with the resources. We have a lot of support from NEMO. We have a lot of support for what we're doing. My point is that when it falls off, and often does, when it falls off when nothing is happening, because we don't see the need for agencies like this unless something is happening. That's the mindset we have, and I'm saying that that's a bad thing. It should be that we see the need for agencies like this all the time, because we have seen what it can do. And you could look back in history, look back on when things like this have happened before, in any place in the world. Look at how we have operated, and look at how others have operated. And you should feel proud, you should feel proud about what we have done. And therefore you should investigate this. There's one thing, you know, I'm not the head of seismic anymore, and therefore I can speak like that. When I was the head, I have to be a bit more circumspect. There's one thing you need to do, and the region need to learn is that you need to support seismic beyond anything else. It is needed. It is necessary. Whether you have volcanoes erupting or not. You have earthquakes, you have problems. We're not serious about that. We, as a people in the region, the Caribbean, we be more serious about that.
Professor, do you have an average of funding annually compared in terms of now compared to what it would need to adequately be able to do what such a unit should be doing annually?
So again, put it back, it's investigative journalism. If you go back and you check how much we survive on, you'll be amazed. It's amazing what seismic does with the resources that we have. So if you ask me that question, we have never had the resources we need. That's a fact, and therefore we have learned to survive with very little by looking for projects by making collaborations. This operation here, you see 3 of us, and unfortunately the face have become mine for whatever reason. It's not me alone. It's a ton load of people. People at Seismic, people at Monstrat, and also people outside. Because of the fact that we don't have any resources, we have had to learn to survive. And what that does is that then tells the governments that, oh, you can survive with 10,000. Right? I mean, that's all you need, right? But it means that it's a kind of a negative thing. When you're so efficient at surviving and very little, it means that you don't get very little. So your answer to your question in terms of resources. If you look at what we have versus other agencies both in this region and internationally, you will be amazed at what we do versus what we have in terms of funding. It is extremely insufficient. You know, we are fantastic. We're good now. We have attention, and the government here and all governments have supported us verbally. But when you come down to the actual real thing, sometimes it's very different.
Professor, I just want to ask another quick question as it relates to the volcano. In terms of the topography of the land, has she changed the topography of the land at all?
Of course. Volcanoes create land. Why? The place that we standing here was once a volcano, part of a volcano. Volcanoes do that, so that I'd expect that to change. But you know, it changes because of the size of the eruptions that we see now. It looks big for us, but in the context of eruptions, it's kind of not that huge, so that the changes will be small. So right now, it's put up a lot of deposits in the valleys.
Right.
In some cases, it will extend the size of the land coastally. So the changes currently are marginal. You might see mainly the changes at the summit. You have a huge crater now in there that you didn't have before. But over the long term, volcanoes create landscape, create land. So I would expect that the changes that you have now, maybe not as big as, say, in the past, but I expect the changes to continue and to go on as the volcano goes.
And I know that magma is flowing beneath the surface, moving beneath the surface. Any chance that you might see magma actually a magmatic eruption, if you were to put it that way?
Well, we are having a magmatic eruption. I think when you speak about magma, what you're talking about, and again, is a lava flow.
Yes.
In people's perception, lava means lava flow. It's the things like what you see in Hawaii. All volcanoes don't operate like that. When magma comes to the surface, it forms lava. That's just a general term for the magma that is at the surface. In other places like Hawaii and Iceland, the magma is very runny. It's not very viscous, it's not sticky, and it runs outside. And that's what you see. It looks fantastic. All volcanoes in the region, unfortunately, they're not very runny. They're very sticky. So as soon as they start coming out, they start stopping themselves from coming out. And essentially, they always will be creating conditions under which they will tend to explode. So they stop themselves, the pressure builds up, and they explode. So the magma, the lava that you're talking about, is all here. That's the lava outside. That sand, that ash that you have there, that is lava. That's the lava that's been fragmented. It's been thrown out the volcano up into the air, falling down as pyroclastic folds. It's been revolverized as lahars. That's the same lava. It's not going to flow like the runny lava. It's going to fragment and have these big explosions.
You spoke a while ago about the prospective change of the landscape on La Soufrière. In terms of access points, I know there's an access point in the leeward and one on the windward side.
Yeah.
Do you envisage that in changes, and is there the potential for any new areas being developed to access the volcano going forward?
Not fundamentally. As I said, I don't think changes will be huge. It's more superficial than anything else. And unless the rock is bigger, it's going to be more or less the same Soufrière. Apart from the top itself, it's going to be a slightly different. But I think you asked me enough questions, you know, fine? I just plan to answer so much questions.
Given the extent of volcanoes in the region, what is the seismic clock saying about the next possible active event
In the region?
in the region?
I think you should ask
What you've seen
me.
kind of
Thank you very much.
All right, that's Professor Richard Robertson, and in the distance there, that is the La Soufrière volcano. We're live here at the Belmont Observatory, and just look at the landscape ahead of you.
we are at Belmont Observatory
Right in front of there, that's
taking a look right.
huge amount of ash is present, and there's still a fair amount of ash in the air. As I speak to you, I momentarily have to look away to avoid the ash getting into my eyes. But that's La Soufrière there in the distance, and they do have a straight-on view here from the Belmont Observatory. So we're going to wrap this one at this point in time, and then we will come back with a bit more as the Prime Minister continues with his visit into the red zone on the leeward side of the island. Alright, welcome back, folks. We in Petit Bodel. We just passed the Petit Bodel Secondary School, and we'll be heading into Chateaubelair shortly. And look at that. Visual, not the best, but below there, that's what Petit Bodel looks like. Convoys ahead of us, and there is just a whole lot of ash on the road. I'm tempted to roll down the windows, but at the same time it's just going to fill the vehicle with ash, so we'll not do so at this point in time. But there's just a huge amount of ash. Just to give you that look again down into Petit Bodel. That's the Petit Bodel playing field there, and you can see it's just packed with ash. It's a lovely village, Petit Bodel, but under the cover of ash at this point in time, as we continue with our journey here on the leeward end. And the truth is that we are not quite into the red zone just yet. All this area is still considered to be the orange zone. That's the cleaning of the windshield there by our driver, who's done a good job today. It's very difficult maneuvering through some of these areas. And that's Chateaubelair over there for you. We're going to get there in just a little bit to give you a first-hand view as to what it's like in Chateau. That's the view of Chateaubelair. Not so further in the distance, but again ahead of us, the presence of the ash. That's a satellite dish right ahead of us there, packed with ash. And you may not be seeing it, but already we're seeing a fair amount of persons on the road right ahead of us there. It's difficult to zoom in. But persons are up and about in Chateaubelair. You wouldn't believe it, in all of this ash. That's a house right there. Half of it is in ash in terms of the roof, and here's a house that has lost its roof right there, all because of the ash. And we're making a right here in Chateaubelair, not continuing on the main to Richmond, a detour here, going further up into the village in Chateau. That's the look. And that's the Testament Church here in Chateaubelair, New Testament Church of God. All right, this is a little curve here, and again, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's just a tremendous amount of ash on the road ahead of us. Majority of the houses appear to be closed with locks on doors, but I'm pretty sure when we get into the area of the Chateaubelair Wharf, the main road in Chateaubelair, that we will see some persons on the road. And that cough, believe me, is all because of the ashes. A little bit of it is seeping through, but we're making it. Wow, so difficult to maneuver through this. Right, and very soon we'll be back onto the main road. And I now see, okay, I forgot that there's work being done on the main Chateaubelair Bridge. That's the reason why I would have made that detour. That's the work right there. Right before your eyes there. But we're continuing onwards, and we very well reach as far as Richmond. Look at that vehicle right ahead of us. It's all bathed in ash. There's a church above there. And I know we're in Chateaubelair. I have an idea as to where we are. I know that we should be making a right turn at the tourism area. But exactly where on the road, well, here's a pointer. Yeah, I know where we are at this point in time. But the ash is tremendous. Just past the gentleman on the road. There goes a dog. Don't know if you would have seen it. Straight ahead should be the Chateaubelair Wharf. Where thousands would have been evacuated on the evening of the 8th when the order was given to evacuate. And there you see 1, 2, 3 guys there having a bit of a conversation. Chateaubelair Wharf is right ahead there, and I believe that's the tourism building. But we're gonna go further north, and soon we'll be heading into Fitzhugh's. Vehicle has to come to a dead stop because visibility, it may look a little different from your end, where you're seeing it with through the eyes of a lens, but we just had to come to a complete slowdown there. Let's look on the base side, as they will say. And the convoy has come to a complete stop. We just about in the area of the beachfront restaurant and bar, which is in the distance there. And they would have suffered some devastation. Notice ahead of us there, caving in of some of the galvanized there. Again, visibility a bit difficult. One thing though, last weekend we came this way on the sea, and there was a smell of sulfur in the air. Haven't detected that at this point in time. Maybe when we do get out of the vehicle, might pick it up. That's a roof that has been cleaned. You've seen a bit of ash on it, but persons have been returning and cleaning their roofs, because the weight of the ash has certainly dealt a blow to a fair amount of houses. And here we see one of the journalists coming out. Yeah? The vehicle just closed off? Okay, alright. But it's no problem? There's no problem? Alright, okay. Alright, so the vehicle ahead of us, I don't know if it's because of the ash or what, but just explaining that he has to slow down, he has to stop, as a matter of fact. He's now trying to pull aside if there is a problem with the vehicle. Alright, well, he's still there. I think he's stuck in the ash. Alright, okay, well, he's out of it now. And that's why it's so important in a convoy that, you do have, persons placed in such a way that if there's the need for help or assistance, that can be given. In that instance, he made it out of it, and we continue with the journey. But the road is just filled with ash, and I can say it looks from our vantage point on the inside, in some instances as high as 6 inches if you look at the curb itself. But one thing for sure, there's been the cleaning of a lot of the roofs here. You just take a look on the outside. This building that we're just about to approach here, Nancy's Bar, you may not be seeing it, but it has lost a bit of the roof. And this is a temporary bridge that has been put in place. Alright, now we're actually in Fitzhugh's, And I'm seeing that the Prime Minister's vehicle has turned around, so that's an indication that they're not going to go any further. There was a talk of possibly reaching as far as Richmond, but I believe the Prime Minister's team might very well taking the side of caution based on the amount of ash that we've experienced thus far, and vehicles are now turning around. So that's the Prime Minister's vehicle right there. All right. So we're not going to reach the Richmond today. It's looking to be pretty difficult, and that being the case, going to be heading back. As we just await the vehicles ahead of us to turn around. I'm just going to briefly give you a look on the outside. Alright, just a brief look. Can't allow too much ash to get into the vehicle. Alright, so we would have reached as far as Fitzhugh's. Road conditions proving to be a little difficult, and the entourage is heading back up. Going across this Bailey Bridge. I think this was constructed back in 2013, subject to correction, but would have been put in place after the following the December 2013 floods. And we noticed that the Prime Minister's crew is out. Alright guys, well, we are heading back out of the red zone here on the leeward side. As a matter of fact, we are just getting out of Petit Badel, heading into Rosebank. But what I can say to you is the amount of ash in Chateaubelair, Fitzhugh's and surrounding areas is absolutely tremendous. And unlike on the windward side, sorry, in Sandy Bay and Owea, where there was a fair amount of damage to houses, especially with the weight of the ash on several roofs, That is not really the case on the leeward side of the island. We would have seen some houses here and there that would have lost their roofs, but by and large, houses appear to be intact. I think where the problem is the whole matter of the cleaning up of the ash, which is going to take a significant amount of time and quite naturally a huge amount of funds to clean the ash in areas like Chateaubalay and Fitzhughes. There were instances where, you know, entire yard, so to speak, was just covered in complete ash. But we are now into Rosebank, I believe. Yes, this is Rosebank. And heading up as we continue with this journey here with Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, who today would have visited the leeward end of the island. And just to say to you that there are still some persons who are back here, not in huge numbers, but persons are still in Chateaubalay, in Fitzhughes, in Petit Bordel. But everywhere we go, as we now look at that in front of us, as we now head down into Rosebank, there's just a huge amount of ashfall. So we're right in the square here at Rose Hall, where a fair amount of cultural activities normally take place. The 9 mornings, they're lighting up right in this area here. And did I say Rose Hall? If I said Rose Hall, the roses have been mixed up. It's Rose Bank, not Rose Hall. All right. And look at that silhouette of the vehicle ahead of us. Wow. And what I say to you, we just have to crawl along. You can't go with any substantive speed. That's a look at Rosebank down there. Again, you see the ash cover, but it's going to get better and better as we move out of this area. There she is in the distance. That's so free. Quiet day for her today. Don't know what tomorrow will bring. But we were at the observatory in Belmont and had a look at the computer screens that were there. And for the last day or two, the activity on the screen was at a very, very low level, and that continues. But we've been advised by the scientists that one just never know what to expect in the future. we see a cat just campering across the road here as we make our way up into Trimuka. That's the Trimuka Secondary School right there. Don't know if you can see it. So that's pretty much the pitch at this point in time. From here we'll head down into Coast Hill and then into Cumberland. As we head back up, we'll just have a look at the ocean out there. It's a pretty lovely day. That's Coast Hill in the distance there, right over there. So we're heading down into what they call Trimuka Bottom, where the Trimuka Cemetery is located. Now you see why a lot of persons from this area would have been evacuated by boat, sorry. The road, though in fairly good condition, it's pretty much winding and at times a little narrow here and there, so it's not one that you can move out with haste. And that's why I believe one of the scientists at the observatory said that it would have been a little bit of a problem, but in the end proved not to be, as a lot of persons were evacuated, especially from Chateaubelair, Fitzhughes, and some folks out of Petit Bodel were evacuated by boat. And there you see we're going around one of these corners, so you can imagine an eruption taking place, and you know there's a huge amount of vehicles trying to get out of this area. Left there, that road takes us to the Trimuka Cemetery right there. This part of the island is really a beautiful place. It's always lush and green, but with the ashfall from the last volcano, the landscape has changed. Or should I say the look of the landscape has changed. What do you call this corner? And again, you see the winding nature of the road heading out of North Leeward. Soon we'll be heading into to Coast Hill, sorry. And yes, now we're entering Coast Hill. One of those small little villages locked away on the leeward end of this island called SVG. This area, I believe, is part of the orange zone. When we leave here, we'll get into Cumberland, then into Spring Village. They are in the yellow zone, and then into Belle Isle, well, Garden Yard, Belle Isle, Waterloo Curtains, and then we're into Barley. It's a pretty big boulder up there, perched on top of the cliff there. One thing I can say about the houses here and on the leeward side of the island, some very good houses. Look at that lovely house at the top there. Hence the reason why they haven't been as much damage as has been the case on the windward side of the island. I did make the remark earlier on, and one of my teammates at VC3 said, well, it's all because of the ganja culture. And of course, there's a thriving trade with the marijuana here on this side of the island. Of course, there's a move now for us to get into medicinal marijuana. Legislation is in place. There's a few companies that have already been registered and operating relative to medicinal marijuana, but the illegal trade still continues, especially here on the northern side of the island. So we're just about to leave Coast Hill. There we see some persons there. And straight ahead of us, a few more persons hanging out at a shop. Well, it looks as if they're doing some cleaning of the road. There's a water hose in the gentleman hand. We see a couple tanks on that truck. So the cleanup is taking place, but the work is huge. A lot of work to be done. That's the gentleman there. I don't know if you pick him up. I'm doing some cleaning, but down there is Cumberland Bay. Beautiful Cumberland Bay. Really a beauty in the eyes of the beholder. Gonna try and see if I can get you a look at the Cumberland playing field. Don't know if you might be picking it up between the That's it right there, right? Covered in ash. And just above there is some settlements, low-income houses. Those are the low-income houses there. And there's Cumberland playing field once again. I don't know if you're seeing it. We've lost it. Now this is this big corner as you head back out of Coast Hill onto the main stretch, so to speak, heading into Cumberland, and you can see the vehicles taking their time as they go around this corner, because there's a significant amount of ash on the road and can prove to be a bit slippery. Alright, so we're now here in Cumberland. Straight ahead there's the Cumberland playing field, and there you see some ash still on the playing field. Facility that was built by the National Lotteries Authority, and no doubt there will be a significant amount of work done to rehabilitate the outfield in terms of clearing up the ash. No damage to infrastructure, but of course the ash will make it difficult for any sport to be played there. So I believe we're now into the yellow zone. From here we head on to Spring Village, and you'll notice that it's getting a little bit more clear, less and less ash being encountered. We see a vehicle, a Chevrolet. It's much clearer now, very much clearer now. To your right there's the Volcanic power plant, the only hydro plant here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Well, no, there's one in South Rivers, I believe, yeah. So just want to reach out to you folks on the live, noticing persons from all over the globe, Guyana, Trinidad, Canada, USA. Good to have you locked in. Just giving you first-hand view as to what is taking place here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines following, well, the eruptions are still ongoing. Last eruption was on Thursday last. Since then, we have not had any major activity from the last volcano, but the word from the scientists is that we can expect more to happen. So we're now heading now into Spring Village. And there is that presence of ash. but not to the volumes that you would have seen in Tromoka, in Petit Bodel, Rosebank, Chateaubelair, Fitzhughes. And in this area, persons would have remained in their homes in this area. There would have been some who would have chosen to leave, but a significant amount of persons would have stayed back in Spring Village and Garden Yard. In the yellow zone, you're considered to be fairly safe in this area. Alright, so we're now going to head across the bridge. Bridge that was constructed about 4 or 5 years ago through assistance from the government of Mexico. And that's what the riverbed looks like at this point in time. But as you notice, it's pretty much, you know, okay from this side. So we're gonna wrap up this live as we head up into Garden Yard. But I can say to you that from here onwards, the presence of ash will continually decrease until we get into Kingstown. But there you notice on those leaves there of the dasheen plant, those huge dasheen leaves, quite a lot of ash there. But thank you ever so much.